Coming up, your game day preview as the Brooklyn Nets look to go back-to-back wins at home, hosting the Chicago Bulls. We break in the money line, all the key matchups, and ultimately predictions for who comes out on top. I'll dive into next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day, and especially extra on game days as we give you our previews free on all those great platforms. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht, and today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. And Doug, where we get started is in looking at that schedule and chalking up another W for Brooklyn.
Look, I mean, if Miami was a get-right spot for the Nets, like this shouldn't be too far behind, and Chicago doesn't even need to have anyone injured in order to be this way, just because Chicago is, they're into it right now. They're 5-12 on the season. They've lost 3 in a row. They're clearly circling the drain. There's Zach Lavine trade talks. There's talks about blowing it up, which they should do, by the way. This team, I think, all sees the writing on the wall. And when that is the way it is, you have to take advantage of these situations. Again, Chicago, they know where they're headed. These players know. Zach Lavine's fighting with the PR guys on the team. They're not talking to each other. It's like, it's over. It's all over with the shot. I mean, like, it's just over. And so against Miami on Saturday, the Nets got lucky, that Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo didn't play on the back-to-back. Now they're going to be on the back-to-back against a team that doesn't seem like they have any reason to want to keep winning and playing together. And the Nets just have to be prepared for that and go out and take care of business. No doubt about it.
Because one thing I'll say is you mentioned losers of 3 in a row are the Chicago Bulls and 6 out of their last 7, but Zach Lavine or not, and whatever his issues are, veterans like DeRozan, like Vucevic, right? Like, Alex Caruso, these guys get out there and start playing. You don't bury them early, you will find yourself in a much more of a basketball game than it probably should be on paper. This one comes in, Doug, by the way, care of our friends over on FanDuel, -3 for the Brooklyn Nets at home, -148 if you want to go money line, and the over-under is set at 215, which is, by the way, Doug, marginally lower than the standard Brooklyn Nets line. Usually 216, 216 and a half. This one all the way down at 215. While I think the means of getting there could look a little bit different, I think it should be a bigger lead sooner for the Nets than they had against the Miami Heat. I'm looking at this in the same capacity. Nets should be up near 110, 112, and they should be holding Chicago under 100 points emphatically in this game.
Well, look, I mean, that part of that reason you notice that it's a little lower here is that Chicago plays the second lowest pace in the league, second slowest pace in the league so far this season. So bad and boring is the one way to put it when it comes to Chicago. And make sure too, by the way, make sure with our friends over on FanDuel, that -148, if you think the Nets are just like lock solid for the win here, right? Like this is just, maybe a gimme or whatever you feel, make sure you go visit FanDuel.com/locked on, because if you bet a winning $5 money line bet, it's going to get $150 in bonus bets. You got to win the money line bet, obviously, but if you're a new customer over at FanDuel, you're going to get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. So make sure you visit FanDuel.com/locked on. No, when it comes to this one, like I said, the Bulls are one of the slowest paced teams in the league. The defense is bottom third. The offensive efficiency, I'm just going to triple check this to make sure, but I'm pretty sure it's in the bottom third too. Yeah, it's even worse. They're the 5th worst overall offensive efficiency. They're just a bad team. That's just really the only way to put it. This is a bad team. Don't let the
names fool you. This is a bad team, right?
And that's what's interesting about this team, right? Is because the names will fool you. Like Zach Lavine, Nikola Vucevic. I said that name wrong every time. I know someone's going to get me on me about that. DeMar DeRozan, even like Caruso, he's everyone's darling. Like everyone,
Mm-hmm.
You can't go to a basketball podcast without someone saying they want Alex Caruso on their team, right?
Andre Drummond. Obviously, you can't go to any Brooklyn Nets fan chat room without them saying bring him back.
Well, this is how you know it's over, right? Because like this team is like kind of been pretty lucky with the health. It's not like they haven't really lost anybody. Zach Lavine missed a game, but they haven't really like they've had remarkably good health and the team's pretty bad. And so
Yeah.
this is where you just kind of know it's over. And so, yeah, good point by you. Don't let the names fool you with the Bulls. This is not a team that like really that the Nets should be losing to. Now, are you worried at all of the Nets coming on the back-to-back here, right? Like they mostly took care of business against the Heat. Maybe the starters played, let's say 10% more minutes than they should have, right? Something like that, right? 10 to 15%. But no one was overly taxed. And no one was ever, at no point were the Nets pushing themselves in this game by, there's just no way. Like this was an overly taxing game. Are you worried that the back-to-back kind of hurts them a little bit here, though?
I would hope not. And I'm actually going to go back to something that we talked about in the Miami game where the starters, because of the decimated roster for Miami, just absolutely pummeled the starting five for Miami. Massive in the plus minus category, right? And everybody had double digit scoring in the starting lineup as well. I'll even go as far as to say that on a back-to-back, I want to be able to look into the Brooklyn Nets bench and players that have performed well and tell them to go out there. Don't worry about the names on the jerseys. They are a bad basketball team, and we're actually pretty darn good and pretty deep as well. Lonnie Walker can step up as he already has been in these games. You saw Dorian Finney-Smith get himself a little bit back on track. But even a guy like Trendon Watford, we're seeing him do the ball handling, the point forward kind of stuff here. Day'Ron Sharpe, like I'm looking at every single guy coming in off that bench and saying, you need to go ahead and win your minutes here because that means, unlike the Miami game, our starters can set the tone early. You carry the day. And by the time we get to halftime, this should be a thing going away. It took the Nets into the third quarter of that game on Saturday night to really put the clamps down and say, okay, this is our game. I want this thing won coming out of the break. And I think the Nets are capable of doing that. And it's beyond the starters. It's about the other guys that should be able to come in here and take over this game for stretches.
I am curious to see what happens with the bench here because I was a little surprised. The Nets ran a pretty tight rotation against Miami. Now maybe they just wanted to take care of business and get out of it. But only Royce O'Neal played more than 15 minutes off the bench in that game, right?
Yep.
He played 29 minutes. Watford played 13. Sharpe played 12. Lonnie Walker played 14. Interesting about Lonnie Walker too. 14 and 16 minutes only over the last two games. I don't know if they're like managing the knee or if they feel like it was just kind of run hot stuff from him or like what it is with Walker, or they're saving him on the front end of the back-to-back because they know they're going to use him more in this game. But it is two straight games where the minutes have been down considerably from where they had him playing. Now, we do know he was dealing with a knee issue. He's not been on the injury reports. So it's like you have to take him at face value with this stuff. But I do find that interesting. But yeah, no, they ran such a short rotation on Saturday night that I don't know. Maybe they're saving it. Maybe they're going to go a little deeper here. I'm not sure. Vaughn has been running some pretty tight stuff lately. So I'd be curious to see what's going to happen. I think we'll kind of know early with how the bench is going to shake out. I kind of do suspect it's just very similar to this game, though. I don't think that they're too worried about just running these starters again.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I guess you can't really shy away from it. And if you want to look at the schedule from that standpoint, a feather in your cap on that is that the Brooklyn Nets, when you go back and look at their schedule, remember we said, well, Miami was coming off the back-to-back having played the Knicks. Well, the Nets had, kind of significant time off here in between their last couple of games. They played Miami on Saturday night, but then they didn't play 3 days prior against Atlanta, and it was 3 days prior when they played against Philadelphia. So they have had this build up to this back-to-back has actually been pretty favorable for them. The other thing, if you want to talk about maybe trying to utilize that bench a little bit, looking ahead to that Toronto game on Tuesday night, an in-season tournament matchup, how is Jacques Vaughn trying to manage all this? Because there's a world where you are going to run your starters aground here. Bottom line is the team in front of you is the team you need to beat, and that's the Chicago Bulls. Ideally, though, I mentioned those double-digit scores for every single starter for the Brooklyn Nets on Saturday night. Do you see it looking dramatically different here? Like the formula remains the same. Get into this offensive set here, and maybe it looks a little bit different as far as getting into the teeth of the defense, where the Heat were significantly weakened on their interior. Chicago still has some players that can be disruptive potentially if we think about Mikal Bridges and getting comfortably near the restricted area as he did on Saturday.
Yeah, I think there's some guys that can get more problem. There's just more talent here for sure, and maybe they're clearly. I mean, even at 5 and 12, they're not playing up to their talent level. I think because they have other internal stuff going on. I think that's important to remember. And sometimes that stuff can just turn around, right? You don't know, team meetings or just banding together or just being professionals and saying enough is enough. Like just because you've been bad doesn't mean, especially with this kind of group of guys, doesn't mean you should continue to be bad, right? Like there's enough talent to turn around here. There's enough talent to beat you for sure, even if it has not really played out this way. So I don't think they should take this game lightly. Yes, there's guys that can give them more problems. They have, they do have some more wing defenders like Alex Caruso. They can bring in Patrick Williams, whatever you think of him off the bench. They have Torrey Craig. They have some other guys that they can sort of throw out there to be problematic. Yeah. And like we know, Lavine can just get hot too. Like Lavine can just, he can get on one as much as anybody if it's going. So I don't think this is a game the Nets should take lightly. And and we're doing this before the Nets have come out with their injury report. So, if someone gets added here on the back-to-back, that's just, that was a timing issue more than anything else. I don't expect anyone to really be here. Again, the Nets aren't at like an age place or a team place where rest is more important than
it's
W's.
A real factor.
No, rest is actually like way less important than W's.
Right.
So I just think that that's sort of like just in general, that's where this team is sitting.
All right, so we understand Chicago's bad. The Brooklyn Nets have everything to play for, so obviously they're going to dominate this game. Listen, same game parlays. I've thrown out a handful. We've been pretty good on these on our previews. I'll just keep it straightforward here, man. Go ahead and lock into the 11 to 15-point win margin for your Brooklyn Nets. That's plus 650 over on FanDuel. Just don't even look back. That's all. That's all I need to say. Lock it up. Everyone can thank me later.
All right, we will be back again after the game, live on YouTube, talking about win or loss, whatever happens here against Chicago. Make sure you're subscribed over on YouTube to make sure you get an alert where we're going live over there.
Let's go Brooklyn Nets. We'll catch you on the post game live on YouTube.